So Unit 4, Activity 1 is all about the creation of fashion fabrics. And fashion professionals will say that your choice of fabric for a garment is essential to the success of your design, and also the customer's desire to purchase that finished product. So the hand and the weight of the fabric will determine how the garment hangs on the body, and the silhouette of the garment is affected by the quality of the fabric used. So professionals note that the function and end use of the garment is the most important factor used to determine what fabric should be used for your design. So if you wanted to create something that's body revealing and drapes and flows, a silk jersey would be a good choice. However, if you wanted to create something that was going to last a long time and be hard wearing, then denim is an excellent choice for that. So fashion designers note that the aesthetic qualities of a fabric is important as well when you're making fabric choices. So the fabric that you choose must reflect the creative direction of your collection. So this might be if the fabric is printed or textured or embellished. So designers need to know how fabrics work in order to make them work for them. So we're going to get started here. Oops, I need to make this bigger. With you get what you pay for. So you get what you pay for when you are working with fabrics. That means higher quality fabrics look better, last longer, and hold their shape better. So let's look at what fibers are in general. So if you took apart a piece of fabric, you would see that it's made from tiny, tiny little hairs that resemble kind of the strand of human hair. And these tiny hairs are called fibers, and the fiber is the basic unit of a textile. So fibers are grouped together or twisted together to form something called a yarn, and then the yarns are usually either woven or knitted, and this involves looping them together. So all fibers go through this kind of process, whether it's denim, taffeta, or jersey. So if you look closely at a fiber, you can see differences in its physical characteristics and structure, but if you looked under a microscope, you'd see even more. So natural versus manufactured fibers. Until the early 1900s, there was no such thing as a manufactured fiber. All textiles were made from natural fiber. But during the 20th century, textile technologists, so these are scientists, textile scientists would try to make manufactured fiber. So they would take substances like cellulose, which is, for example, wood pulp, or petroleum or natural gas or other chemicals, and they would make fibers from them. So manufactured fibers can be put into two different categories, synthetic or regenerated. Regenerated fibers are made from natural substances. So one example is cellulose from spruce trees is mixed with chemicals to turn into filament fibers using a technique similar to a silkworm spinning its cocoon. So regenerated fibers include vicose acetate, triacetate, and lyocell. Conversely, synthetic fabrics are manufactured just from chemicals and don't have that cellulose component. So nylon was the first synthetic fiber created, and it was created in the 1930s using chemicals from coal and oil. Also nylon. In addition to nylon, polyester, acrylic, elastane, and aramid are all examples of synthetic fibers. Something to note is that all fibers have a generic name, such as cotton, wool, rayon, vicose, and the generic name refers to the type of polymer they are made from. However, manufacturers are also given a trade name by the company that manufactures them. So an example would be like Terylene, which has a registered trademark sign after it. So the first letter of the trade name is always capitalized, and this practice distinguishes trade names from generic names. And if you look inside the label, you'll see that the fiber's generic name is always listed. This is a practice that's legislated by law, so people know what their clothes are actually made of, because people are more familiar with generic names such as cotton and wool and polyester than trade names such as Fortrel or Dacron. So this is a way that we keep manufacturers responsible for what they are doing. So structure and properties. The structure of a fiber refers to the length, the shape, the density, and the thickness, and the fiber structure will influence its property. So what you need to remember is that a fiber's property determine what it can do and how it behaves. A lot of properties and structures of natural fibers are determined by nature. But now, with science, textile technologists have genetically modified cellulose polymers in cotton, for example, to introduce new features. So they can change cotton's performance properties, and also they can even change things that are pretty basic, like the fiber color. The structure and properties of existing manufactured fibers are modified as a means of improving performance. So new manufactured fibers are being developed to meet consumer demand. For example, polyester fibers are made extremely fine, 60 times finer than a human hair, and these fibers are called microfibers. So technology is advanced to the point where these manufactured fibers can be produced, so they contain beneficial chemicals. So, for example, there are tights that contain nicotine patches or tights that contain moisturizers. So how a manufacturer decides to determine what type of fabric to use in the production of textile fabrics has to do with the end use. So understanding the structure and the properties of different fibers is essential. So you would use a different fabric for an infant sleeper than you would for an evening gown. So let's look at a table of a couple of different properties of fabrics. So when I talk about luster, I'm talking about the sheen and the shine of a fiber. So chemicals might be able to be added to increase or decrease the luster of a specific fabric. Flammability is a huge one. We generally don't want our fibers to be able to catch fire, but naturally they do. So some fabrics are given changes so they are not flammable. This is especially big in infant wear and infant bedding and such, so it is less likely that the clothing is going to catch on fire. Elasticity is also huge, so the amount of fiber will stretch and then return to its original size. So elasticity can be added or taken away from a fiber in order to do or not do what they want it to do. So identifying fibers, you can see here that under a microscope, all of these fibers look different. Polyester is the most uniform, and polyester is a synthetic fabric. Cotton, you can see, is windy. Silk is pretty smooth. Cashmere, alpaca, fine wool, and coarse wool. So it's important for people who work with fiber products to distinguish one from the other. So this includes product developers, this includes buying offices, this includes government standard departments, textile testing labs, anything like that. So some fibers can be identified through sight and touch, and a lot cannot. So textile testing can help you tell one fiber from the other. So this is visual observation of the textile. You could use a magnifying glass, but a microscope is better. You can do burn testing, so you can note the burn rate, odor, and ash and residue of the specific fiber. You can also do chemical testing. You can soak the fiber in bleach or nail polish remover for 5 minutes, and then you can see how it discolors the fiber. Let's look at how a yarn is actually constructed from fibers. So before a fabric is produced, fibers must be turned into yarns. And this is called spinning. Perhaps you've been to like a pioneer village and watched someone spinning during using a spinning wheel. And this is very similar to the industry, except it's modernized. So let's look at the process. Basically, natural fibers need to be washed. This is important because you want it to be clean and not have any sediment on it when you go through the rest of the process. Manufactured fibers, obviously, since they're made in a lab, are made clean, so they don't need to be washed. Then there's combing. Combing untangles all the fibers from each other, and then the name given to once it's combed is called a sliver. Then it's roved. Roving results when the combed web of fibers is divided up into narrow ribbons. And then from there we get single yarn. Single yarn is when the roving's gently pulled and twisted through the process of spinning. So you take the roving and you manipulate it so it is one single yarn. And then carding. Carding is when the yarns are combed more than once. So yarns made from carded fibers are smoother, with smooth fiber ends sticking from the yarn edges. So high quality wood fibers are combed and then carded to make fine worsted yarn. So carding is an optional thing that takes it to the next level. Types of yarn. So there are lots of different types of yarn. The only natural filament yarn is silk, which is over here. The fibers unraveled from cocoons to form a filament yarn. Often several fibers are slightly twisted together, and this process of twisting holds the filament fibers together. The production of manufactured fibers is similar, but chemicals are used. And nylon sewing thread and fishing line can also be created in the same kind of way. Textured yarns are next. So filament yarns are smooth and have more luster than spun yarn, and they are straight and smooth and flat in appearance. They get textured in non-natural ways, such as using heat, chemicals, or machinery. And the reason why you would texture a manufactured yarn is because it would increase the stretch and the recovery of the yarn. It can add bulk, so make it thicker. It can make it softer. It could improve wrinkle resistance, and it could improve wash and wear properties. So texture is often given to do certain things to specific yarns. Ply yarns are over here, and that's when two or more yarns are spun together. They're thicker and stronger than single yarns, obviously, because they're multiple of these put together. And you can look at rope in order to understand this. If you look at like a rope that you would use for camping, you could see that it is ply, so it's not generally one strand, it's strands woven together. Novelty yarns is over here. You can use two different types of yarn to create crazy looking yarns like this. So there's different sizes, types, and they're generally decorative. You can do certain things to make them shiny, and so novelty yarns are special. And then you have this idea of blended yarns. Yarns made from two or more different fibers are called blended yarns. Sometimes companies do this to reduce production costs, so they'll take a nice product and a not so nice product and move it together to create a medium product. You can also use it to develop different textures. You can make a color subtler, or you could avoid exhausting the planet's resources. So you can see here that there are some other options like enhancing fabric performance, saving money, and creating decorative effects. All right, fabric construction, and then I think we're going to have to leave it there. Fabric construction is generally some form of weave, some form of knit, or then there's special fabrics that are neither woven nor knit. Weaving in the industry involves interlacing lengthwise and crosswise yarns together. So you can see there's yarns going this way and there's yarns going this way. And there's a lot of technical things involved with weaving. So if you are interested in this, there's a lot of vocabulary that has to go along with this. One of which is called warp yarns, which is the length, the yarns running the lengthwise, and the weft, which is the crosswise yarns that are interwoven into the warp yarn. So you can see here on this loom, there's yarns going this way, and then the yarn would go through a shuttle left and right and go in between those. So a lot of the clothing that we wear are made with woven materials such as denim. Also satin is used with weaving, so you can do a lot of different things. You could create a really like structured, strong fabric, or you could create lingerie or evening wear with woven fabric. So woven fabrics have some problems with them. They always fray when they're cut in certain ways, so if you are using a woven fabric, you need to cut it in a special way in order not to make it fray as much. They're also not as warm as knit because they don't allow the